Bismillah walhamdulillah. We begin in the name of our Lord and we praise Him and we send the best benedictions and peace upon the seal of prophethood, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. To proceed, today I'm here with Claire. It's just the two of us, and we're going to be talking about secular Koranism, this concept of secular Koranism as devised by Claire Call, and also this American version of it, the U.S. version of it, that I believe that our sister Carol has had some input into. The Shariah, what is actual Islamic law as opposed to Quranism, and how might this work out in America? What are the two different types of calls? One for secular Quranism and one for Islamic jurisprudence, if you will, the Sharia, and just kind of how that looks. And because we're talking about, first and foremost, I'm sorry. Assalamu alaikum, Claire. Carol, sorry. Assalamu alaikum,
Waalaikumsalam.
Carol. How are you?
Okay, well, you meant called me Claire twice, and I already have people
Oh,
accusing me of being her. So I just
oh,
want to
no,
make
no,
sure
no,
you tell
no.
everybody I'm not her.
Absolutely not. And I apologize for that.
That's
Um,
okay. They seem to think I'm using a voice thing I'm talking in or something. I don't know.
Alhamdulillah.
Internet
No,
craziness, I
I
guess.
I know for sure the two
Yeah.
of you are not the same, especially since the first time I actually heard either of you speaking, it was in a conversation together. So it's kind of hard to be in the room at the same place at the same time if if you're not two different people. But anyway, so we're going to be talking about this topic today of secular Quranism. And I want to begin with an ayat from the Quran. I want to actually talk about what is the Quran for just a moment. And then, once I do that, I'll open it up and let you explain, because it seems as though perhaps I've done an injustice explaining it according to those who propose it, of what is secular Quranism. But we'll begin with what Allah, God Himself, says about the Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين. And that short ayat, that's the first ayat of the second surah, the second chapter of the Quran. Allah says that is the book. In it, there is no doubt guidance for those who wish to guard themselves against the displeasure of their Lord. And this is a very loose translation. We could make it very strict, but this suffices as a translation. And in that verse, God is telling us that this is the book. There is no doubt. There is no doubt. Well, I'm sorry, Claire. You're more than welcome to join the show, right? I just, because she just said, two Freudian slips. It's an open invitation. So I mean, that's there. But anyway, back to this verse of the Quran. We read. There is no doubt at all that this book is guidance for the people who they are pious, they are upright, they are God conscious, they are people who want to shield themselves from the displeasure of their Lord. And so the Quran is a book that was revealed by God. It is believed by the Muslims. That is 1 billion people, over a billion people, that this is the revealed speech, the revealed word of God. It's 6,236 ayat, or verses in English, even though that doesn't do the word ayat justice. These 6,236 verses, or ayat, they were revealed piecemeal, here a little, there a little, over a period of 23 years. And that revelation over a time allowed for it to be understood and applied in the most appropriate of ways. And what's more is that despite it being revealed piecemeal over 23 years, you see that there is no contradiction whatsoever in this book, and that it is a book that the ideas and the methodology flow throughout. There is a what can I say? There is a fluidity of the book, and it is a book that has been revealed in the Arabic language. Though God is free of need of any language, it was revealed in the Arabic language. And anything that is not Arabic is not the actual Quran, but rather an interpretation of the meanings of the Quran. And so that's a very, very basic, rudimentary, we can even say, oversimplified understanding of what the Quran is. But having said that, we'll now open it up. What is this concept of secular Koranism?
All right, so I'm going to call my back. I don't know if you want to have Claire to come on here and say it or not, since she's here. I didn't expect her to be here.
Well, I mean, that was her choice.
You want to come on, Claire, or yes, no? I don't know. Maybe. Well, anyway.
No problem.
Anyway, it's Claire Claw's idea. And the idea is she's taking just the Quran by itself. No, don't come on.
No.
Saying no. Okay.
No
All
problem.
right. So she's taking the Quran by itself without hadith and all the rest of the stuff. And her idea is to look into the Quran and take the ayahs out that have the actual punishments next to the ayah. So it's not the entire Quran she's actually saying. She's saying to go after the ones that have the actual punishments that a state would actually take care of. Like, for example, if an ayah says something like, if the believer does this, or, the non-believer does this, they're destined for hell. The state doesn't take care of sending anyone to hell, so that wouldn't have anything to do with the state. So basically, it's pretty much some of those hudud laws and stuff, and some attitudes about religion in the state itself. So she's saying she wants those adopted. And her suggestion is to put the entire thing. My suggestion is that you can't do it like that in the United States, what she's talking about. And I can't talk about other countries in that way because every single democracy or republic you look at is set up different. But in the United States, there's no way we can do a top-down thing like that, even if we were trying to. It would never get in, and probably wouldn't get voted in anyway because people aren't going to vote in like that. My idea is that the idea itself is an interesting idea to get Muslims themselves, theoretically, because we have a lot of problems in the Muslim community anyway, theoretically, to get out of this idea of being reactionary all the time in the United States. It's this constant, like even CARE or Muslims in general, something happens and then they all want to rally about that and start getting all mad, but they're not being proactive in any way that I see as useful for them to even be in this country at this point. So I would like a change in their thinking. And I think this can be done by creating a political platform that Muslims can start thinking that, okay, we can't unite on sectarian issues since we're all squabbling about them. We're not going to unite on a Gita because everybody's squabbling about them. But they could kind of get the idea of maybe we can unite on the idea of the Quran itself, not like not like the I can't speak Arabic.
Qur'anic.
Yeah, not like the Havarij or all that. It's not. I'm not saying like that, and I'm not saying like a Quran only kind of idea. But I'm saying is, could Muslims get in a room, start talking about the law in this secular country that they're living in a way that would actually help the entire country itself? And what I'm proposing is that secular Koranism can be a different way of thinking about law in the United States. Is this making sense so far, what I'm saying?
No, I'm listening to what you're saying.
Yeah.
What you're saying is making sense.
Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking of. Instead of all this reactionary stuff, we're going to go, this person, or for example, what happened in England over that Lady of Heaven movie, and they're all protesting down there in the street and all this stuff. Okay, that was England. I'm seeing too much. I'm seeing too much crazy stuff. Something happens, people want to go and protest, and they're splitting up more and more. But this would be a way for Muslims to say, look, We're going to try to create and build this country, the United States, into something better. And we're going to drop the sectarian fight just for trying to get some of our more conservative values put into government law. And I think the best way to do this, I mean, I was thinking about the United States, will be a political platform that promotes this idea. It would promote that maybe in some of these Islamic schools that we need to talk about the founding fathers instead of acting like they're the enemies to Muslims. Because I mean, it's pretty extensive, all this, my thought that's gone into this. We talk about the founding fathers as the heritage of this nation, to talk about the Jefferson Koran, the way that Claire does, in the sense of creating a mythos that might be something that they can identify with in some way, a political mythos. If they could do this, we could have Muslims actually working together to create a better America that's more proactive instead of reactionary all the time. Because what I see going on is a disaster, and it's been going on for over 40 years, and it's getting worse. See, that's my thinking on this. So if Muslims did that, and I'm talking about the conservative, the socially conservative ones, if we did that, if we decided that we were going to try to create some kind of alliance with the Republican Party Christians and the more conservative Republican Party, in a way to create some kind of alliance like there was in the city of Medina, if it was possible to kind of have this idea in their back of our head and do that, and try to help the Republican Party to go against all this alphabet soup stuff and everything that everyone's all upset about, we could build a better country without selling out our religion. What I'm seeing is Muslims getting involved in politics and selling out. You understand, like that mess with Omar Suleiman down at the border here by Tijuana. I mean, this stuff is not, we don't need to do that. And we don't need to be hiding, and we don't need to be this restrained by thinking so much inside the. We don't have to let the immigrant communities' problems interfere anymore with us trying to be more proactive. Do you understand what I'm saying? This
I understand what you're
this is what my view is about. There is no way that we could ever impose Sharia law on the United States in its totality, but Claire has never suggested that. But it is a different way of thinking, and it is this different way of thinking about the law, about Islam, the law, getting it together, that I think would help this country, as opposed to this constant objectifying everybody and fragmentation we're seeing. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he created an interesting idea when he did that community in Medina, and I think it could kind of work like this, because the United States is unique about religion anyway compared to everywhere else. You can find almost every religion here, some aspect of it, maybe not the high education, I mean the higher levels of it, where you'd have to go back to other countries maybe to involve in, but you have different kinds of Buddhism here. We have different Shinto, Taoist. I can go to almost anything, in my car in one day, hear all kinds of different things if I want to go to them. But there is a way that we could start thinking about America as not our enemy, as Muslims.
Well, if I can interject, I'm listening to everything that you say, and I don't know, you're able to see Claire's comments on the side or no?
Oh, let me go look.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, I never. Yeah, let me go look.
No problem. So what I want to say is that I'm listening to everything that you're saying, and really, there's two major points, and there's a lot to be said. And one of the things, and this is why I wanted Claire to be on the show, because she's far more radical than you, right? And my discussion with you is going to be far different than what my discussion with her would be. So with her, I'm going to I would very forthrightly challenge her that she doesn't know what she's talking about when it comes to the Qur'an, very first and foremost. But with you, it's a different approach, because you're talking about basically allying ourselves with a political party that's already there and simply asking the legislature to pass different legislation.
No, I'm
And
not just asking that. Well, I am proposing a
mhm.
shift and an alliance to actually create some constitutional amendments that
Okay,
suit our purposes without saying without saying we're going to have secular Quran over everything, and maybe not have the same punishment that goes with it, because this country is
then
different.
that's not following the Quran, right? I mean, it's something completely different,
No, no,
even than
no,
the
it's not.
Quran.
No, it's not. It's not. It's still using the Quran as the basis for how we're making our decisions. And it's still, there is
Well,
nothing.
if I can stop you right there and say that's what we're supposed to be doing anyway. That's what Muslims are supposed to be doing anyway. Muslims as individuals, as families, as communities, as political blocs, we're already supposed to be using our religion, our the Quran and the Sunnah as a foundation for the judgments that we make, the moves that we make politically. So when we ally ourselves with somebody or disalign ourselves with somebody, it's not based on political parties, but rather platforms, meaning that what are they, what are the issues of the day? But even if we did choose a party and we could influence them and we should be able to, the problem is we don't unite, but that's a whole nother issue. But the fact is that if we did that and we called our representatives and called them to account for something, then really at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is get legislation passed that we're in favor of. And that's what we, again, as Muslims and as Muslim citizens are supposed to be doing. I'll take a step back to something you said and say that, one of the things is teaching that, America itself as an entity isn't against Islam, and that, the founding fathers are not enemies to Islam and the like. Again, this is something that should be understood it should be. I'm not saying it is. It should be understood in our communities to begin with. So again, none of this is radical. This is all basic. What as Muslims in America that we're supposed to be doing anyway. I haven't heard you say anything that's really radical at all, but rather,
Right.
this is what we're supposed to be doing. Except for one thing you said, and that is you had mentioned making an amendment to the Constitution.
Right.
And the thing about making an amendment to the Constitution, there's a process there. So you have to have 2/3 of Congress suggest an amendment. And then after 2/3 of Congress agree upon this, you need 3/4 of the state legislation to agree upon that in order for it to get passed. And if they can't pass it that way, and sometimes the opposite happens. Sometimes 3/4 of the state legislator, I'm sorry, 2/3 of the state legislator demand Congress hold a convention. They do that even though they don't want to. And then after that, 3/4 of the state legislator have to agree. And if neither one of these two ways work, then you actually they can, meaning that it gets stalled. Then the Congress or the state legislators can take it to their constituents and actually have popular debates so that they can gain the support from their people. But ultimately, you need 2/3 of Congress and 3/4 of the state legislators to pass an amendment or to change an amendment. And since the founding of the country, there's only been 27. There's been 11,000 approximately. The number could be off a little bit, but 11,000 proposals for amendments in the U.S. Only 27 actual amendments. And for us to ask for something specific, let's say, and this is the problem, is that when we get into this, then we ask for a specific case. And one that Claire, she herself speaks about sometimes is the fornication or the lashing for adultery or something like this. Yeah, and I say something like this because I know what the Quran says, but she says something different, and this is a fact. And she doesn't accept that because she relies upon one verse, even though that verse has been abrogated. So, but let's just say, for example, we said we want for the fornicator, for the adulterer, to be lashed. Let's just, as an example, say that, right? And so, we ask for this amendment. For that single amendment, we have to get 2/3 of Congress to agree with us, and 3/4 of the state legislature. That means over 30 states have to agree that this is what their people want in order to get this amendment passed. And that's just for one amendment. That's just for one amendment, and meaning one law, you know. And if you tried to do a blanket law like we're going to govern by the Quran, that wouldn't work as an amendment, because we're also saying no, no, we don't want to do that. We just want to take parts of the Quran. So my thing is that we're not really speaking, honestly speaking, we're not really talking about legislation. I mean, amendments to the Constitution. That might be what Claire
I
speaks about,
am.
but
I
that's
am talking about
it's
amendments to the Constitution.
how do you, knowing what it
How?
takes?
I don't know. Listen, I
So
don't know. But
it,
what I'm
it's it's
saying is,
it's not practical, because
whether
you
it's
have to.
practical, okay, listen, it was
No,
not practical that we had a man in the desert stood up and said, La ilaha illallah, and went and had a meeting and said, who wants to believe in God? And nobody wanted to do it. Okay.
no,
All
they
this stuff.
did.
Well, no, they
So
did, but you understand what I'm saying.
no, I
My
do,
point
but
is,
see, this is the thing. This is what I'm trying to say to you, and that's the main point right there, is that the Quran. If we take the Quran as a whole, there are 8 major themes in the Quran, right? And this is important, right? So we'll just do a numbers thing real quick. There are 8 major themes in the Quran. The first one is that you believe in God, that He is absolutely one. The second one is the glad tidings. Whenever He says, "For those who believe, this is the reward." And then the second one is the warnings. Anytime if you disobey God, this is the warning against you. And then the Shariah, the laws. And then the haqa'iq, the reality. What is the metaphysical realities of the world around us, right? And then our relationship with God, invocations, supplications, and the like. And then stories of the previous people, the wicked and the righteous, right? And so those are the main things. Now, when we look at that, it's a whole package. And if we try to isolate one thing out of that, there's not really it loses its substance, it loses its asl, it loses its foundation, that which it's built upon. The laws don't come in a vacuum. The laws come with something else, and with that is the foundational beliefs. Now, having said that, if we look at the laws, and this is part of the problem with the whole idea of secular Koranism, again, I said the Quran is made up of 6,236 verses, ayat, right? Only 350 of them deal with laws, but 350 of them deal with laws. Out of those 350, again, this is a numbers game. Out of 350, 140, almost half, deal with worship, ibadah, how we pray, how we fast, how we make pilgrimage, all of these things. 80 of them deal with transactions, no dealing in interest, civil transactions, commercial transactions, what is buying and selling. 70 deal with family law. 70 verses deal with how to get married, how to get divorced, custody of children, inheritance laws, all of these things, right? And then you have 30 that deals with what is justice, what serves as evidence, what are the rights of man. Then you have 30 more, that only 30, and this is the important thing, is only 30 verses that actually deal with criminal law. So if we're talking about criminal law here, why not say we want to look at these 30 verses, and just these 30 verses, and no other verse other than these 30 verses, because that's the criminal law in the that's less than 5% of the verses of the Quran deal with criminal law, and then 25 deal with international law. But so we're talking about a very small amount, 30% that deal with actual criminal law. So even if we spoke about an amendment, per se, not only would we be taking it out of context, the greater context, but we would be taking it out of the social context of what about these other 300 verses. So we'd be looking at just 30 verses that dealt with criminal law and asking for an amendment where we want these criminal laws in place. But I know Claire's thing, of course, because she's also said it on the side here, that she's also talking about the 70 that deal with family law. So she wants family law and she wants criminal law. And does she also want transactional law? Right. And so now we get this. And so then why not the evidentiary laws? Right. What about the rights and the responsibilities? And if she wants that, what about international law? And if everything except worship, we have to have, there needs to be something. But going back to what I was saying is that the reason that Islam, the reason that this worked to begin with, is because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and look, let's just point to one thing. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam called the people to God. God revealed in the Quran that in drinking there is evil, right? Then God revealed after some time not to approach your prayers intoxicated. And then after some time it became prohibited. Because had he prohibited it right up front, the people would not have accepted it. Why? Because not only were they not prepared for it, but their hearts weren't prepared for it. You have to prepare the people's hearts to accept the laws. Legislation, there's really two parts of a legal system. And I'll shut up in just one moment. Either a legal system can be imposed upon a people, excuse me, and this is tyranny, as I've said, several times, not here, but over past conversations. Either it's imposed by force, which is tyranny, or it's accepted by the people. But if it's accepted by the people, there has to be three elements there. The first element is that it has to be legitimate. There has to be some kind of legitimacy to it. And when we say that, we mean that the people recognize that this leads to justice, right? If the people realize this leads to justice, this leads to good, this leads to mercy and wisdom, then they'll want it, right? And so that's the first thing. The people give it legitimacy. The second aspect is that it has to have adjudication, meaning that it has to have a legal system in place that can enforce it, or will, a system of law that will enforce it. And we already have the system, right? So we need the hearts of the people to incline towards it to make it legitimate. That's first of all. We have the
Wait a
legal
minute, which
system.
one? Which legal system? The secular one or the?
I'm talking about any legal system.
Oh,
This
okay.
is required for any legal system, right? And then the third thing that it needs is compliance. And when we say compliance, those people, the people who the law affects, they have to obey the law. But then the government has to have the ability to enforce those laws and punish those who break it. But in that, the punishment has to be seen as leading back towards the aims of it has to be seen as reaching the aims or reaching the goals. And so if these things aren't in place, nobody's going to accept the legal system. Nobody's going to accept it. So the very first thing that you actually need to get the people to accept a law is that they see it as being just. They see it as being merciful. They see it as being wise. And if this is just, if we're just taking literally, if we're taking, 30 or 100 or 150 verses out of the Quran and saying, no, forget about the rest, it's not important, just these laws are important, right? The people are not going to think that. Why would they accept that? Why would they accept that you say the laws are good, but the message is not, right?
They don't have to. The Muslims have to. Do you understand?
No,
The
because no,
Muslims have to change their thinking that are living in the United States.
that's a given.
Listen, this is what I'm talking about. For the Muslims to be a real political force in this country. I mean, right now I'm ignoring the problem with, so many don't speak English and all that. I mean, I'm ignoring all that. I'm pretending like, let's say everybody can understand what everybody's talking about and is on the same page with that. If they all agreed that they want this country to be a better country instead of fighting against it, can they come together with avoiding sectarian issues, avoiding some kind of crazy idea that they're going to reinstitute, the caliphate or something here? It's just not going to happen. Can they come together and start thinking in a way that is going to help this country? And the law, changing their idea about the law will. Right now, what we have are Muslims selling out Islamic law as a price for being politically active in this country. We see it with that crazy congresswoman. Okay.
So that's true, right?
Okay,
that
but let
people
me
are selling out. Go on.
Let me finish.
Mhm.
You're not going to get a constitutional amendment that says, hey, everybody, let's read the Quran and do this. But the Muslims need a real focus here, and the leaders haven't given them one. Okay,
What leaders?
I'm talking about the Muslim leaders.
And I'm saying what leaders? What Muslim leaders?
In the masses, right now, the only way I can see is to somehow, we have many problems in the United States, and it, and one of them is we have domination by immigrant authority on Islam. We have to get out of that, and this is a proposition to do that.
Well,
okay?
if I can hold on one second, let me just interrupt and say two things. The first thing is that many of the Muslims that you're speaking about, honestly speaking, are the immigrant Muslims who didn't come here to change America. They came here to get paid, right? They came here for education. They came here for work. They came here for the American dream. They don't care about changing America because they didn't want to change America. They wanted to change their life. That's first of all.
I
And that
understand.
leadership that's on them is giving them what they want, right? What they want.
No, the
But
leadership on them is stagnating the rest of us. Okay, and
that,
you
that,
know it's true.
not my leadership.
Okay, maybe
Not
not
my
your
leadership.
leadership, but I'm saying that in general, that's what's going on. The sectarian fighting is horrible. It's horrible. Okay, so if can Muslims here and in England and in Australia, can they get out of this idea and start looking at building this country or not? I don't know, but I do think that we can make some sort of a political platform that can influence the Republican Party in this country to get some of our laws enacted, not in the sense of saying we're all going to follow the Quran now, but laws that build up the family, that are not rewarding bad family behavior, which is what's
Okay,
going on. I
so
mean,
here's
this
a
is one.
question. Do you understand? And I'm not attacking you in any way. I'm asking you a serious question. Do you understand the difference between the U.S. Constitution and state legislation?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Okay, but I'm
Now,
saying,
no. There's a reason I'm asking this because when Muslims live in a region, we can easily influence the legislation of our region. But trying to influence the entire country when we're less than 5% of the population, right? This is why, when we talk about passing laws, that's one thing. When we talk about changing amendments, that's something completely different.
no, look, instead of thinking like it's not going to happen, the thinking should be the creation of this alliance that comes out of even the discussion itself. By discussing secular Quran and this Quranism and this idea, could we join with the 65% of the Christians in the United States, right? The
Mhm.
socially conservative ones as a political bloc? Can we actually join with them in some way and do that in
So,
order to
what does
promote?
God say? What does God
Yes,
say in the Quran?
yes.
God says in the Quran, تعاونوا على البر والتقوى ولا تعاونوا على الإثم والعدوان. Help and assist one another. And he's
Yeah,
talking about the Muslims and the non-Muslims. Help and assist one another in righteousness and piety, and do not assist one another in sin and transgression. We're
that's right.
already supposed to be doing that.
But we're not.
So what I'm saying to you is, and this is perhaps the gist of my argument against Claire, right? Is that pie in the sky thinking, right? Like let's just talk about it and hope that it comes, right? This is wishful thinking. Now, boots on the ground, actually trying to influence hearts, actually trying to change hearts, actually talking to people about important matters like the importance of family, establishing community, and things of this nature, that gets things changed, right? So if we're actually speaking to individuals, if we're guiding people to do what we're supposed to be doing anyway, right? And Muslims first and foremost, but humans in general, if we talk to people about doing what we're supposed to do anyway, that's where change starts because now you have the populace changing. But
I'm
if
not
you're
saying to
trying
not
to
do that.
no, I know. But what I'm saying is if you try to go after not even you, this is the problem. When you say I'm not worried about legislation, I'm not saying you said this. I'm not worried about legislation. We can change an amendment. Again, mind you that the amendment itself takes 2/3 of Congress and then 3/4 of state legislation, right? To change one amendment. It's not something that is a simple matter because it takes the majority of the United States. It takes the majority of the United States to agree that this is what they want. And you cannot get people to agree to something if you haven't even touched their hearts.
They don't even have to know it's us. You create a political platform, You tried
So
to
then,
join in with an
what
alliance.
so what you're saying? So if I may, then what you're saying is that we're not. This isn't a da'wah at all. This isn't an invitation. This is not an invitation at all. We're just actually trying to reform society in what we think is the best image, but without religion. We're basically in the background trying to pull strings.
No,
And
we moved. The people moved to this country on purpose. Okay, so I'm not suggesting anyone give up their religion. I'm not suggesting something like that. I'm saying is religious people need to get together. And Muslims need to start thinking about making this a better country and trying to have an effect on laws. Look at this Roe
what does
versus
that
Wade
have to
thing.
do with secular Quranism?
Because right now, all that happens is every time when you get Muslims together, they start arguing over why they can't be together in the same room.
I
Okay.
don't.
And what, no, I'm not saying you do. I'm saying that's what goes on. We had, when I first became Muslim, there was one, let's see, two masjids here. Then I don't know how many years ago I looked, there was over 22. All it is has been fragmentation after fragmentation. I can't speak. You know, I kind of,
Fragmentation after
yeah, I talk a
fragmentation.
little funny. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys.
No
I talk a
problem.
little
So,
funny. So my thing is after 40 years, okay, I went to a masjid and I sat outside because I couldn't find the room that had the English going on. Oh, and then when I found it, it was too crowded. I couldn't get in. So I went and sat outside and I listened to all these youth sitting around talking about how they hated white people. And that is the same conversation that went on 40 years ago. So there are many things that have to be worked on. So we need dawah, we need regular dawah, we need stuff like Robert Dufour is doing with Islam for Europeans. We need to start thinking about how we can engage with the legal system in the United States without this crazy leftist
we
stuff.
already can. We already can. And I'll tell you, here
As a
in
group,
Baltimore,
as a
no,
group.
here in Baltimore, I get a mail. I'm part of a mailing list, and I get letters that say, "Hey, they're voting on this." The latest thing was recreational marijuana, right? Recreational marijuana, and it was a plea, right? Don't complain. This was the message. This was the email I got. Don't complain when they passed a law making legitimizing this, making this legal. If you didn't go vote against it, right? And that's the reality, is that we have a duty here as Americans. Now, when somebody says, "Well, we don't vote on presidents and we don't vote on Congress and Senate," that's fine if Muslims don't want to do that. That's not an issue with me. I could care less what I don't believe in federal elections because I believe it's like a big football game. But that's all besides the point. But when it comes to the laws, local laws are voted on. They're voted on. These things are, people go in, they vote, and they're either passed or they fail. So we as a block, as a voting block, should be aware of the issues. We should be made aware of the issues, and we should be invited, encouraged to go vote. If we vote as a people, this becomes an influence. This is how voting blocks become voting blocks, because we start voting as a people for things and against things. I've seen liquor stores shut down. I've seen casinos opened in my city. I've seen a lot of things take place because the people come together and they vote, right? And so there's already a way for us to do everything that you're saying, and that's actually just simply participate in the system that we're already supposed to be part of.
Then
Now,
why have care, for example?
well, care is a problem in and of itself, because care itself, I've heard stories and I've seen, and I can also give anecdotes to the opposite side. But for the most part, this is an organization that many of its members are immigrant Muslims, and they cater to and care for the immigrant communities. So
Okay.
care who gave them authority, right? That's not a legitimate authority. It's just another organization. And we could point to ISNA, we can point to ICNA, we can point to all of these different
That's right.
organizations.
That's right.
But there's one, MANA, the Muslim Alliance of North America, which this is a homegrown, it's indigenous Muslims, right? That brought themselves, they networked and they started to build from the grassroots. This is a legitimate, but they don't claim to speak on behalf of all the Muslims in America like other organizations do. And so what I'm saying is that we need to look at these institutions as what they are. They're organizations. They don't speak on our behalf. My local community needs to vote in favor of what our local community needs, right? So if something's going on in my city, then we need to vote on that as a community, right? As
Okay.
I gave you the example of recreational marijuana, right? So saying we want an amendment is already against the law, federally speaking, right? It's already against the law. So now it's a state issue. And so this is, then we have to look at it from a state issue. And so we have to be aware of these things, right? We have to be aware of these things and as a community and use our numbers. That's we don't have to reinvent the wheel is what I'm saying. We're already
How
supposed to
is
be
this
doing these
reinventing
things.
the wheel? How is this reinventing the wheel?
Because we don't have to say, for example, all Muslims, just as an example, all Muslims, let's come together out of the blue, agree upon laws, take these ayat from the Quran, and take this to the Republican Party and ask them to join with us or let us join with them so that we could pass these laws so that we can try to get an amendment, right? Why do we have to do that when we already agree with them when it comes to family, we could say family matters, right?
Well, it's not
The
just Family Matters; it's
No,
taxes and other stuff too.
of course it is, and that's another issue with Claire Call, her flat rate tax. Like she includes that in the secular Koranism, and at 20% income tax, is insane anyway. But the fact of the matter is that that's not from the Quran at all, right? And yet she lumps it under secular Koranism. So my point is that again, whatever issues that we already agree with the conservatives on, and I don't say the Republicans, that's another issue in and of itself. Why would we align ourselves with either Democrats or Republicans when both of them, it's the same, it's two sides of the same coin, and all of them, it's all a manipulation thing, a third party, right? A third party is the way to go. Whether it's the Libertarian Party, which is probably the one most Muslims should be with, quite frankly, or something else, we should be. But again, why go to them and ask them? Can we align with you? Can we do when we should already be doing it? We don't have to make a special
Okay.
call for this.
Okay. So it's okay with me. I mean, it's okay with you if I, as an individual, go down and align with the Republican Party.
A person's politics is their own opinion, their own personal thing, even if I disagree with it.
No, but I'm
Me,
saying, is there something haram in that?
not as far as I know.
Okay. Is there
Allah.
something haram with me getting 5 friends and there'll be 6 of us going down there?
No, why would there be?
Okay. Is there a problem with if I've got 20 friends and we want to go down there and we're deciding that we're going to promote some sort of legislation to quit this rewarding people having these kids that we have to keep paying for? Is there something wrong with that? Because I'm overtaxed. We were overtaxed really bad where I'm at.
Do it, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Do it.
Okay. So what's the limit?
There's
If I
the
can do it
limit.
myself.
The issue. The bigger issue is this, and this is the issue that we take with it, right? And this is the issue that I take with it. You're saying that what I'm hearing you say is we as Muslims in America need to be politically active so that we can affect change in these lands, so that we can heal these lands because of all the immorality and vice that has taken root. The way to fix this is that we become more politically active and align ourselves with the people who have shared values so that we can try to push legislation to affect real change in this land.
Right.
That's what I'm hearing.
That sounds pretty
I
good.
agree with that. I agree with that.
Okay.
But now,
So why
when we
is there a
hold on.
problem?
This is the problem. When we say we want to establish the secular Koranism, a legal system based upon the Quran in these lands, right? Where we want to change.
Just a minute. Claire has her idea, right?
Mhm.
All right. That's her base idea, but any country or anybody can change it into something else because we're not in the same place. We're not in a monarchy. Some of her ideas have to do with if you're living under a monarchy. Okay.
So let me just interrupt you and say 2 things to you. One, we both invited Claire on the show today, right? And I've been inviting her for a few days now, right? So she's been invited to defend herself, and she refused. So you actually came on, not to put you on a spot like this, but defend the idea of secular Quranism, right?
No, I'm defending the idea of secular Koranism in the United States.
Right.
I
And
cannot
so
make a judgment call about these republics and democracies.
I'm only talking about
Yeah.
America. I'm
Okay, I'm
only
only
talking
talking
about
about
America.
America. So I'm
And
saying
so
if I can
what
go
I'm
as an
saying,
individual, then I certainly can go as a group to something.
yeah, absolutely. Now, this is what I'm trying to say to
No,
you
wait a
is that
minute. Wait. Let me make some points sometimes, Brother
go
William.
further,
Okay.
further, no problem.
Is there anything against Islam that if a non-Muslim looks in our holy book and realizes a law would be pretty good used here because they remember it was used when they were a kid here, something very similar? Are you saying that because the laws in the Quran, they can't be reminded of this and then try to do something similar?
I didn't understand your question, honestly.
Okay. Some of these laws in the Quran actually were part of the American legal system in a different forms when I was growing up, when I was young,
Yeah,
real
no, of
young.
course.
Okay, so is there anything? So I can go to the Republican Party as an individual. I can take 5 friends. I can take 20 friends. I can have an idea that I'm pushing family values. Now, I'm a Muslim, so I'm going to look at the Quran as a whole, obviously. But now a non-Muslim wouldn't. What if somebody was a non-Muslim? They looked in the Quran and they saw a law and they remembered, yeah, it was kind of like that when I was a kid. Maybe we should start trying to do something similar here. Because that law is in the Quran, they can't ever use it?
Now, so this is an excellent point, right? So to suggest to people that they adopt certain legislation into the system that's already here, right? And again, this is what I said: being politically active, right? Being active within the system, voting, going to these things, having our say as a voting bloc, right? That's something we should be doing anyway. Now, that's different from saying I want to establish a legal system called secular Koranism.
Yeah, but you're getting stuck on what Claire's been saying. Claire, I'm talking about what it would look like in the United States. Her idea can't go in that way in the United States. This is an approach. This is something to think about, to discuss, and then try to figure out how you're going to affect the law. Now, maybe the whole idea seems stupid to everybody, but no one's suggesting anything better either. Okay,
Now, so
so is
this
this
is that's if what you're saying, let me just be very clear. If what you're saying is, as Muslims, we should be A, politically active, and B, we should go and be part of the system so that we vote on laws. We don't isolate ourselves so that whatever happens, we're victims to it, right? But rather we're part of the legal system to where we are voting on the laws. We are part of the process of legislation, and we influence that based upon our family values, based upon our views of transactional laws, based upon our views of criminal law. All of these things, our idea of morality, we want to influence the people through our voting block, right? And we should do that. Maybe we can't agree on matters of aqidah. Maybe we can't even agree on matters of sharia amongst ourselves. But we can all agree, for example, as an example, that adultery is forbidden in Islam, and so we wish that they would return to the adultery laws in this land, right? As an example. So if that is what you are saying, we're in complete agreement. We should be doing that anyway. I have no problem with that because we
how?
already need to be doing that.
Okay, is there a problem with getting lobbyists? How are you going to get lobbyists if Muslims keep acting like they're a bunch of individuals living over here?
We become the lobbyists.
Okay, so how are we going to become the lobbyists when nobody's thinking past these arguments everybody's having? Look, we
So
don't have
so
to say
so
our
now
voting
you're
block.
you're mixing matters.
No,
You're
no,
mixing
no.
matters. No,
Listen,
you are,
listen,
because
listen, listen, listen to me. Okay, it's a whole picture here. All right. How do you suggest that you, to me, what it sounds like is that you're suggesting we're supposed to sit and wait until the problem comes up. That to me is reactionary. It's just going back to the
I never said
reactionary.
that. I didn't say that
Well,
one
you're
time.
saying the law
I
comes
didn't
up,
even.
we're gonna do this as a block, we're gonna vote on this,
No,
right?
not at all.
I
Not at
thought that's
all.
what you said.
No, that's part of it. We become part of the legislative process, right? We
How do you
if
suggest we
we're
do that?
again, we do what we're already supposed to be doing, and that's the difference between what I'm saying. Look,
How do you suggest we organize to do that?
now this is where I said you're mixing matters, right?
No,
This
I'm
is where
not. This is a bigger picture of organization. I'm not seeing the past 40 years as doing anything that was really productive.
again, if I may, if you want to talk about how we organize the Muslims such that we become a voting bloc, right? That is one matter. That's one matter. If you're talking about how we influence society by allying ourselves with people who have shared values, that's another matter, right? So if you're saying, for example, yes, I'm saying to you that we can become an influence upon legislation. If we want things to happen, we can propose legislation and we can vote on legislation and we can vote on the leadership that will influence that legislation. That is within our power, and we should already be doing that. تعاونوا على البر تعاونوا على البر والتقوى ولا تعاونوا على الإثم والعدوان. Help one another in piety and righteousness, and do not help one another in sin and transgression. We should already be doing that. As Muslims, we should already be enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. This is a given. This is something that we should already be doing.
But
Now,
what are you saying?
hold on one second. That's one issue, right? And on that issue, I believe that we are in agreement. Now we have two other issues. The first issue is the issue that you raised. Well, how do we get the Muslims who are constantly arguing about everything to do that? That's one issue. Then the third issue is this issue of calling for a legal system, a system, right, based upon the laws that are
No,
found
I
within
didn't
the
say
Quran.
anything about calling upon a legal
That is
system.
what secular Quranism is. I know you said you're not talking about Claire Call's term,
Her,
but
her.
it's her term.
No, listen. Oh, let me think of something else. Let me think of a system. Well, okay. Let's say I'm a communist. Okay, I'm a communist, and I'm trying to get a bunch of people to agree with communism or something. And now I'm going to say I'm a communist, but I'm going to inject some religion into this and let you guys have some religion, right? Okay, it's not the same, exactly the same as communism. It was the foundation of it. So she has an idea. The idea is look at her idea.
It's
Can we come
flawed.
up with something better?
That's why she needs to get on here and defend it herself.
No,
Because
I'm not
honestly,
defending it. I'm not
no, no,
here
no.
in
I
the
know.
debate.
I'm
I'm not
saying she
defending
needs
it
to
in
get
that
on there
way.
and defend it
No,
herself.
she doesn't. You
Because
need to
no,
talk to
she
me.
does.
She's in England. Her thinking has to do
You're
with
saying
England.
that so this is the problem, is that she's saying literally in the comments she said it. She's calling for a single party state whose legislative system is based upon the Quran, right?
Yeah, she
And
is.
again, 350 ayah of the Quran, and that's it. Just 350 out of 6,236, right? So that's what she's calling to. You're saying
I
no,
don't think it's
Muslim.
that many. I don't think she's talking about all those. What
Well,
I'm
probably not
saying
the
is,
140. Hold on, but what you're saying is that you're not talking about that. You're talking about secular Quranism in America, which is nothing more than actual political activism as a political bloc, a voting bloc, as a Muslim community.
no, it's going past being a voting bloc. I'm saying we have to move past even being a voting bloc into initiating legislation
Yeah, same
ourselves.
thing.
Okay,
A
so
political bloc.
how are you going to do that? Well, how do you propose to do that beyond telling people they should be doing it already?
Well, see, and that's the number one problem, right?
That's
That's
the
the number one
problem.
problem.
So
It's the
that's the
problem
question.
because the Muslims themselves, right? The Muslims themselves, we are supposed to be governing ourselves by God's law. We're supposed to govern ourselves by God's law. And I'll give you one clear example. Usury, interest, is forbidden in Islam. There's no ambiguity whatsoever. Interest is forbidden in Islam. And
That's
yet
it.
you'll have Muslims buying cars, buying houses on interest. You'll have Muslims starting businesses on interest. You'll have them getting credit cards. You'll have them getting student loans. You have Muslims dealing in interest every single day. So one of the primary laws and one of the greatest sins that a person can do, and there's many, many punishments that come with dealing in interest that's mentioned clearly without any ambiguity, that's mentioned with dealing with interest. The Muslims won't govern themselves. So the thing is that the very first thing, if we want other people to govern themselves by our laws, then we first have to find a way that the Muslims start governing themselves by their laws.
Yeah,
And
that's
we don't need a police force to do it. We're supposed to police ourselves. Now, I'm not saying to you that we don't take and say to the disbelievers who live around us, our neighbors, our family members, hey, there should be laws against usury. They should end all the usury. Don't pay back student loans. That's ridiculous. Cancel all the usury on student loans. Cancel all the interest on all student loans and just tell the students all they have to pay back is their base loan. That's smart, right? And that would get a lot of traction. But to say, hey, I have these verses from the Quran, and in these verses, I made up kind of like a legislative system. I think you should take a look at it. That's something else entirely, right? So supposing to a legislator, supposing to a political leader, hey, you should look at this. You should think about this idea, and let's see how far we can get with it, right? Versus, hey, I have 70 verses about family values in the Quran. I think you should work towards implementing these, right? They're not going to listen to you in that regard. And if they did, they're not going to be listened to by 3/4 of state legislators, right? So the thing is, you work what you can work. You work with the people who are going to work with you to get things done, right? And I'm not being a naysayer. What I'm saying is that we can work with them, but we have to work within. The Muslims themselves have to believe in these things. The Muslims themselves. So what is it that the Quran calls to? What is it that all the laws call to? Right? All of it is about calling us back to God, purifying our hearts, reestablishing moral values around us. It's about establishing family values, building real viable families. It's about building stable communities, stable states, if you will. And then after that, a cooperative world. And so the reality is it's about our faith, our relationship with God. It's about our individual lives, and it's about civilization as a whole. So everything is being called to these two things: God, the individual, and civilization. Now, if we can ally ourselves with people who want to work towards those things, this is a good thing. But to try to establish a political system called the secular Quran or secular
party,
Koranism, hmm?
party, party. Political platform and party
That's
to
fine.
influence the Republican Party is what I'm talking about. I'm not
So
talking
so
about putting Sharia law over the Constitution. You would have to have a revolution and a dissolution of the Constitution to do that. And I'm not
and
suggesting that.
so you're basically just saying you want to influence the Republican Party, who for the most part are already they already believe, even despite whatever Claire says, they already believe that Christianity, the Christian values are priority, and they're working towards those Christian values. To change and say no, we want you to change your position and look at the Quranic values instead of saying, hey, we have values that are in common, let's work
No,
together.
I'm saying is we can look at our Quranic values, the entire thing. We can look at some of these laws that could possibly be encouraged as a way to make this country better and to go through the secular law process to get it in. I don't see anything wrong with that.
No, and
There's
I
no
said that.
reason, there's no, yeah, there's okay. I do not think we have to keep waiting around anymore.
So why call it secular Koranism?
Because people have to start thinking about the Quran. The Muslims aren't even thinking about the Quran when they're entering into politics right now. What they're thinking about is, how can we be in politics? We're going to
I
go
want to stop you
promote.
and say, I want to stop you and say, you're not able to speak on behalf of all of the Muslims. There are Muslims right in my city who are running for Senate who are trying to influence the politics from an Islamic
But
standpoint.
there's
We can point to the
there's
Democratic
no organization or anything
Democratic.
that they think can get into to promote this. Now, if there is one, that would be good. The promote purpose of secular Koranism is to get people to think and come up with a better idea. No one thinks it's actually going to pass.
Mm. I think that I think that Claire would disagree with you with
I
that.
think you could talk to her and see something else. The point is how to do that. Can we do that? Can Muslims start
So
looking at the Constitution and the law in a way where they make friends with the Constitution and can create a better country? Right now they're trying to be reactionary and fight
I
against it.
I would say two things. The first thing is again, what you're talking about right now is influencing the Muslim community, right? And
No,
in doing that,
I'm talking about the ideas
you
thrown out.
said, how do we get the Muslims to
Yes, that's
view the
part of it.
Constitution? Right.
That's part of
That's
it.
part of
How do
it.
you get the Muslims to get on board with this instead of doing the alphabet soup mix as a sellout to get, they're selling out. I mean, I'm sorry. The Muslim
No,
community is
that's
telling.
fine. I don't disagree with that. Now, that's again, that is one issue, right? The Muslims, and I would suggest that we look at the Warif community, right? The Warif community that came out of the Nation of Islam, became Sunni Muslims, Orthodox Muslims, and these people, they are people who recognize the Constitution, they recognize the American system, and they work within the American system. And again, you have many of the indigenous communities that are here that already do these things. So what we're talking about really is the immigrant community, which in themselves is already in a state of sin just because they made hijrah to the lands of the disbelievers. And people can say what they want. There's fatwa. Juan Sharisi's fatwa is golden on this matter, where it is impermissible for them to make hijrah to the lands of the disbelievers for worldly for meaning setting up residence in these lands illegitimately. And that's what's happened. So my point being is that these people are supposed to be under the authority, supposed to be under the authority of the indigenous Muslims already. And the fact that they did not place themselves under the leadership of the indigenous Muslims to begin with is an indication that they have no they don't desire Islam here. They desire the dunya. They desire the things of this world. So how do you influence them? You call them away from this world and you call them back to God. You call people back to God. When you call the Muslims back to God, right, then they will start governing themselves by the guidance of God. But as long as you're talking about do this, don't do that, the laws, the laws, the laws, then their heart.
You're seeing this as one or the other.
No, I'm not. Not even a little bit.
I mean, why would having this idea of what I'm talking about, how would that stop the kind of dawah you're talking about?
It's what you're talking about is not da'wah.
No, I'm talking, but you are. I'm saying, how is that hindering
No,
the dawah?
I'm answering your question. You said, how do we get the Muslims to start behaving this way that they're already supposed to be behaving? And I'm saying the way that you get the Muslims back to doing what they're already supposed to do is call them back to God, call them back to the messenger of God, because it's only in their belief in God and the messenger of God that they're going to submit and surrender and listen to the rules and regulations. One of the reasons that many Muslims are leaving the community, they're not leaving Islam, but they're leaving the community, is because they're fed up with, they're tired of all the rules and regulations. They're tired of people telling them, you're doing this wrong, you got to do it this way, my way or the highway. They don't want to hear this anymore. And they're not hearing God loves you. God is the compassionate. God wants what's best for you. So he has given you these laws. So he has given you these rules. They're not hearing that. And so rather than it's really a matter of telling people that God, that everything that God has given to us is for their benefit, and then they'll want to do it, right? But telling them they have to do it, that's not going to work. It's just not going to work.
Tell them they have to do what?
Anything. But in this
Who's the they?
particular case,
The they.
but in this particular case, telling them they have to work within the system, telling them that they have to become a political bloc. To tell them this, they're not going to want to hear that. But
They
if you
hear
remind them
anything. They don't want to hear anything from
that
American Muslims. Okay,
that, that
that's the thing. So that's a big problem. That would be a problem and part of the uphill battle with this idea. But what the real issue is can we come up with something better?
Okay, now here's a quick question, and I'm going to do this, and this is going to sound pretty arrogant of me, and I'm doing it for a very important person. And again, I mean not an important person. I'm sorry, important reason. I was going to say, I really wish Claire would come on for this because this is really what she needs. What's the difference between hukm qati and hukm dhanni? What's the difference?
I don't know.
What's the difference between the Sharia, fiqh, and a fatwa?
Well, one is a scholarly opinion based on an examination of the sources.
Fatwa, ممكن.
Huh?
What's
Right?
but what about Sharia and fiqh?
No, Sharia is leading you to the Sharia is the path to God. Yeah, I
What
understand
is
that.
the difference between nasikh and mansukh?
I don't know Arabic, Brother William.
No, that's what I'm trying to say is that these are basic things that a mujtahid needs to know. A person who goes into the source, looks at the ayah, and develops the law. What is the role of a legislator? What is the role of the legislator in Islam?
In an Islamic government, you're talking
No,
about?
no, no. In Islam, what is the role of a legislator?
I
A
don't know.
faqih, yani, I
Well,
mean,
yeah, if it's, yeah, okay, yeah,
no, I'm
okay.
saying, what is the role of the faqih? What is their role?
They are to guard the Sharia and
They, their,
yes, and to
their
interpret it.
role, interpret the intention of the lawgiver, but
Right,
recognizing that there is absolutely only one lawgiver, and that's God. And you're
right.
right. The reason that they do that, the reason that they interpret the intention of the lawgiver is so that they can protect it from these fanciful interpretations, these things that, oh, I read this, so it must be this way. I read it, I read the translation, and so it must mean this. And so this understanding, knowing how a judgment is extracted and what is the difference between a demand, a choice, and a declaration, understanding these things in Islamic law, these are all requirements before a person even starts talking about passing laws, right? And so we can talk about working within the system and trying to work to pass legislation that we all agree upon agreed values. We should be doing that. But when we talk about let's extract laws from the Quran and push to get them passed, there are
No,
prerequisites
no,
to
no.
that.
Look. We don't believe that it's okay. As Muslims, we don't believe that. The Claire's always talking about this, but we don't believe it's okay that there's all these kids that really are not being taken care of by their parents in the right way. It takes a long time to bring a kid up. Okay, and there are financial incentives now in the United States for people to not get married. And sometimes there's financial incentives to get a divorce, but still be together because there's no law against people just living together or whatever here. But sometimes married people get divorces for financial reasons that actually want to stay together. Now, some of these things need to change. Okay,
Of
there's nothing
course.
that we know as Muslims is people should not commit adultery and they should really, really think hard and fast about trying to get a divorce. I mean, one thing you're going to get a little mad and have a tizzy fit, but if you're going to get a divorce, especially if there's kids involved, there needs to be a lot more thought going into it. There's nothing wrong with trying to promote this type of value in
No, we
society.
should be we should be doing it anyway.
Yes, but there's nothing wrong with trying to go through the legal, legal,
We should be
legal
doing
avenue.
that anyway.
Right. Okay. So what is the
More than that,
problem
more
with
than
doing
that,
that?
more than that, within our own communities, we should already be establishing within our own communities arbiters. And the system itself, the court system itself, is so overloaded that they want communities to establish arbiters, arbitration outside of the legal system. So if we did that, if we had our own arbitration with our own arbiters, people who can listen to a case, make a judgment upon it, it would be enforceable by the state itself. We actually have the power to do that. So when it comes to marriage, divorce, child custody, inheritance laws, when it comes to all of these things, somebody stole something from me, you know, I want to sue them for that, or they went into bad business and they did a bad business practice. We can actually already do that in our community with our own arbitration, our own arbiters to make change, right? We can do that within this system. And so there's nothing preventing us
You're
but
talking
us.
about a parallel legal system?
No, it's not parallel. It is parallel in the sense that we would judge the cases based upon our own background, but it's an arbitration system that's underneath of the system here, meaning that it's our arbitration for our community. But
Our as an Islamic arbitration.
yeah, absolutely. But
Yeah, I
it
don't
would
believe
be,
in that. I don't believe that for a secular state. I don't. I think there needs to be one legal system, and that the people have, if they can have their religious stuff separate in their
and
own way.
this is specifically why I'm against secular Koranism.
Well, this
This
is
is
a secular
specifically why.
state. This is a
It does,
secular state.
but we as Muslims, right? We have our own laws, right?
Well, we
So
can do
the
arbitration
way,
that's voluntary, but I don't. I don't want to be forced into any kind of arbitration.
so if you got married into the system, into the court system, and you wanted a divorce through the court system, right? You would rather go to a secular judge, right, than a Muslim judge for your problem. I'm asking.
Yes, yes, because there's
Oh, so
yes,
this is
because I would want to go to the judge that's from my particular sectarian legal system, because we have too many Muslim
who's
legal
to
systems.
say they can't be?
I'm just saying that's what I would do. That's what I would
Yeah,
like to do.
no,
And
but
here's the thing.
I'm asking you if you could go to a qadi who is Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali, Hanafi, Ja'fari, or Zaidi, right? If you could go to any of them, or if there's a sixth one, or I mean a seventh one, or something like that, you have your own arbiter that represents your own school, and he's going to hear the case and he's going to rule on the case, and his ruling is enforceable by the secular government that we live in, right? You would still rather go down to the secular courthouse than to have the Islamic arbiter hear your case for you?
I think so in the United States, but I still would go to the Islamic one too. I would do
So,
both.
well, no, it doesn't. That's redundant because the Islamic one is under the secular one.
Well, it's not under the secular one to me.
No, it is.
No,
That's
to
what I'm
me,
saying.
it's not.
What do you mean? Because I said under?
No, yeah, to me, the Islamic law is not under this law.
No,
But
what I'm saying to you is that the arbitration is governed. It's governed by the secular, meaning it is enforced by the secular court system here, right? What I'm trying to
no,
say here is we have the ability, we already have the ability
well,
to
that's
judge
cool.
based upon the Quran here. We already have that ability.
Yeah, no. Because I'm not agreeing that the state can have any kind of authority over my religious law.
No, that you're missing the point.
They're giving a sanction of approval for it. So
Yeah,
the
of
answer
course.
is no.
Well, so you would rather have no authority or to influence the state?
I would get these secular divorce or whatever. I mean, are we talking about divorce or what are we talking
Sure,
about?
we could talk about divorce.
Well, I
It's
mean,
fine.
whatever it is. I mean, I can't imagine which I'm imagining this being a family law thing, this arbitration
Yeah,
thing. But
yeah,
are you
of
talking
course.
about?
Mhm.
Are you talking
No,
about like somebody stole my car or
no, no. Well, it could be if I mean because basically when you go to arbitration, it's either family oriented or it's civil. It's like a civil suit. Those are the two that get arbitration here.
well, both people would have to agree to it.
Well, of course, that's the
Well, if
nature of
both people
arbitration.
agree to it and stuff, yeah, it's possible. I might would, but I do not believe in having the government have any kind of approval or sanction over my religion. I don't
So
want
what I'm,
any interference from the government on my religion.
but
I don't accept their authority on that is the problem.
so if
So
you
you're
don't
saying
accept
what
their
you were
authority, but
suggesting?
hold on, you don't accept their authority,
No,
right? But you
no,
want to influence and change their laws to align with your religious authority.
no. I wanted to change the laws to make this a better country. Okay, I don't think
Then
anyone has to believe in my religious authority. It just happens to be that Muslims have a lot in common with conservative Christians and stuff on some of these issues. Although sometimes conservative Christians don't have an idea about what to do about it. Okay.
so I'm going. What I want to say is, and because I got to start wrapping it up, what I want to say is that I agree with everything that you're saying. I
Mhm.
don't necessarily agree with what you're saying, in the way that you're saying. I agree with what you're saying that Muslims as a community need to form a voting bloc, a political power bloc, to where
Right.
we not only push legislation, but we vote on legislation so that we can change legislation so that we can heal the society in which we live.
There
We
you
don't
go.
take this nation as an enemy, especially those of us that this is our nation. We was born here, we was raised here, we're generationally American, but rather than seeing it as an enemy, we see this as a host. It is our host nation. It is our home nation, and so we treat it as such. We treat it as our home, and so I agree with that. But now this idea, and I agree that we align ourselves with people who share values with us so that we can lead to influence, right? That we help them in that which is good and we do not assist them and we stand out against them in what is wrong, even if they're our allies. I agree with that. Not saying you said that, but that's what I agree with. Now, that I agree with. Now, cherry picking from the Quran and calling it, giving it this title, secular Koranism, that's what I'm against. And I'll stop for 1 second and say, because I'm wrapping it up, I just want to say that I really, the secular Koranism that I'm familiar with is that which Claire Call calls to, right? Which you've presented as an American secular Koranism sounds to me like what I just described that I'm agreeing with, right? Now, before I move on, I want to say that not only do I agree with that, I believe that the way to get the Muslims to move towards that is by calling them back to God, calling them back to community, so that we have viable leadership within our own small communities that we may grow and network and actually start to govern ourselves, which is already possible. And we don't need any special moves to do that. We simply need to be willing to do that. And if we did that, we would be able to influence the hearts and minds of other people based upon our peace, based upon our justice, based upon the tranquility people see from us, based upon the Islam that they see from us. They would want what we have. And even if they didn't want what we have, they would be more likely to agree with us because we're living it ourselves. Now, having said all of that, if you don't mind, we can take a couple minutes and go through this list of comments from Claire Call. Would that be okay with you?
Uh, I guess if we can have another conversation about this sometime, not this week or anything, but some
Yeah,
other
no,
time in
no,
the
no, that
future.
sounds good.
Okay.
And there is a question here, and
I just want to make
uh,
a point about the arbitration, though. Is
okay,
that in general, if I'm going to go to court, I'm not going to arbitration. I don't
okay,
sign those papers for arbitration anyway.
okay.
I don't
Um,
like it.
somebody asked, "What do you mean by secular?" And I think that that's a fair question to ask.
Secular is the separation of church and state that we have in the United States. I'm talking about the government that's here in the United States that does not have a religion that is picked as being a higher hierarchy than anyone else, and that nobody has to follow religion or needs to. Secular as not under the auspices of a church or something.
So you're saying the separation of church and state.
Yeah, pretty much, and it's the secular reasoning of it. I that does not mean that a religion can't enter into the political discussion. Separation of church and state in the United States means the separation of the state of being on our religion. It's our freedom from the state in our religion. It's not the other way around. People keep acting like if you're a religious person, you can't enter into the political debate on the basis of your religious argument. That's not what the separation of church and state is in the United States. The separation of the church and state is to protect religious people from the state. Okay, that's what it means, and that's how I am interpreting it in the United States. I can't interpret it everywhere else because I don't understand these other legal systems. They don't have an emotional
in the First Amendment. In the First Amendment, it is the freedom from the state imposing a religion or a religious clause upon the people. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really that simple. Is that the state cannot have an official religion, nor can they give you a litmus test to see if you qualify for anything based upon your belief system.
But it does not mean that we cannot participate in this system. Well, that's what's being promoted by
and that's
people.
That in itself, based upon your definition, if I may, right? And I put the list away actually because I don't think that it's proper to have a discussion with you about Claire's ideas. If she wants to defend her ideas, she's more than welcome to join me.
I didn't mean you're free to do that. You're all ready to do it. I wasn't trying.
No, it's okay. No. I just came to the conclusion myself that it just makes more sense that if I'm going to have a conversation about it, let's have a conversation with the person who presented the ideas, right? Mm-hmm. So what I would say though is that based upon what you just said about secularism, then and I'll reiterate it just for clarity, and you can make any corrections. So secular as a general statement, not as a definition, but as a statement, is that the state has no right to impose a religion, nor to limit the religious beliefs of any people. But the religious people can in fact partake in and influence the secular government or the government.
They can. They can, and that's the interpretation.
Okay.
And they can enter it. They don't have to hide the fact. I mean, you don't have to come up with a scientific argument for why you want something.
I actually on Twitter, what I'm going to do, and I might do it here too, is on the description, actually share some of the Maryland state legislation because Maryland state constitution, because really in the Maryland state constitution is beautiful because they say that you can't be judged, like you can go for any state office, any state position at all, no matter what belief you have, as long as you believe in God, and you believe that there will be consequences for your actions by God in this life or the hereafter. That's part of the Maryland state constitution. And other than this, and it's nice because basically in the Maryland state constitution, you could be any religion you want, but you have to believe in God. Right? To be an atheist is actually seen as being untrustworthy in this state. It's a very interesting thing in our constitution. But
that would have been the norm, certainly, probably when the constitution was made. Yes.
Absolutely. But I want to just focus on this, and then again, we are trying to. I am trying to wrap it up. Yeah, but no. Don't be sorry. But what I want to say here is that if that is the working understanding, usage of secular, mm-hmm. that the government cannot impose religion nor impose upon the religious community, mm-hmm. right? But the religious community can in fact partake and influence the government openly and freely without any blame. Right. Then why secular Koranism? Because it's not the state that's influencing the Muslims, or in this particular case. but the Muslims influencing the state. Why secular?
Because we are allowed to, under this Constitution, with that interpretation of the First Amendment, as a religious people, we are allowed to assert ourselves on government. The government can't assert themselves on us. And I'm going by that particular understanding. So when I say it's secular Koranism, can't do
You just
anything. The
you just
secular
went
type.
blank. Hold on. You said when you say secular Quranism, and then
Yeah.
it just went
So
blank.
this term secular Koranism isn't counter to the way this particular constitution is set up. I don't know if it would be counter to other government constitutions, but the Quran can be used to influence government under this constitution by people who are not being. Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, I
The
do,
Quran can
and
influence the secular.
this is
Yeah.
this is the problem that I'm having here. This is the problem that I'm having here is because honestly, you're saying something different than what Claire Hall says, right?
Because Claire lives under a different system and a different
And she has a
government
completely
setup.
different model. Part of your
My
model is
model is the Constitution in the United States. I'm using the Constitution in the United States for this too.
as a model. And
Not a
saying
model,
that,
as
yeah,
a
I understand.
definition of words, how you define it. And that's what that means about using different characteristics in different countries. I can't speak for a country that's under is under a monarchy. I can't even relate to it, to be honest. You know.
But my point here is that your understanding, when you personally say secular Quranism, you're talking about Muslims aligning themselves with different political backing, right? That shares values with us, so that we can influence legislation for the betterment of society. That's what you're talking about.
Yes, and hopefully with amendments in some way for some of the things that are really vitally important to save this nation. There may be the necessary to have some amendments, but I don't see the
So,
term
so that's
secular
fine.
Cornism as bad. I
Now,
don't see it as being bad. I
if
think it's a
you're
good term.
using it to mean that,
Mhm.
right? If you the term is a funny term
Right.
because it indicates that anybody can just go into the Quran and take laws, extract laws from it. And this is the issue. When you say that is your usage of the term, then I say start up a group and do your thing.
Okay,
Right?
but
Start
listen,
if that's your definition, hold on.
yeah,
But that is, I'm telling you 100% that is not what Claire Call says.
it
And that's
doesn't
not,
matter. It
it
doesn't
does
matter.
matter
No,
because
it
I'm
doesn't.
going to
Listen,
explain to you
listen,
why.
brother.
Hold on. No,
Okay,
this is
okay.
important. Hold on.
I'm
The
not
reason
going
this is
anywhere.
important is because when you say secular Quranism, nobody thinks what you're saying. I'm telling you, nobody's thinking what you're saying. Everybody's thinking what Claire Call says. And when you use that term, right, and you don't define it, everybody automatically assumes that you're talking and supporting what Claire says. And what you're saying is simply that, hey, as Muslims, we need to be an influence on the legislative system in the land that we live, right?
No, I'm
And
saying all Americans too, Brother William.
yeah, no, that's
And
fine.
I don't have a problem with a non-Muslim looking into the Quran and saying, yeah, maybe that's a better way we should start doing things. I don't have a problem with them doing that.
No, I want them to do that,
Yeah, that's
right?
right.
I want them to do that, but I want them to do it holistically
Yeah.
and not try to extract a legal system devoid of the message of God.
I am not advocating the eradication of the American Constitution or a revolution. I don't have this idea like some of these socialists have that we're going to collapse the whole economy and then rebuild from the ground up. I think people can be a little bit more creative than trying to destroy everything than build from the ground up. If it ever
So
comes to the point that all the Americans want to be Muslim and institute a Sharia law, then that's actually everybody wanting to do with it, and that's not inconsistent then,
no,
right?
absolutely.
Right.
Now, that's the thing is that what you're saying, and this is the problem. This is the only problem that I have with this term as you are using it, right? As you are using it, as you have presented it. The only issue that I have the term is that is not what anybody thinks of. Rather, we all think of what Claire has to say when she uses the term, and it's not the same thing. So when you use it,
Her her
when
ideas might be more in tune in a country that has a monarchy
her
that
her her
speaks.
idea falls on its face right off the bat because it's according to her interpretation of the English translation of the Quran without any background in usul tafsir, usul fiqh, or even
I
any
don't
of the matter. And not just that, but she rejects aspects of the Quran itself. She outright detracts from the Quranic message itself, right?
look. Some of
So
this.
one of the very first things, Qul huwallahu ahad, right? She says, no, I'm not even sure about that. So the fact is that she's literally divorcing the rules and the rules and regulations from the overall message. She's literally extracting less than, I'll say 350 verses, and she could say less than if she wants, but 350 verses out of 6,236 verses, she's extracting that and say, we don't need the rest of it. We just need this for the laws, right? That's what people are thinking when they hear secular Quranism is the messages she put out. And that is absolutely unacceptable. It's absolutely unacceptable.
It,
And
and listen,
that's the problem I have if you was to say American secular Quranism is that you would get put in the same folder as she's put.
well, I don't. Look, I've spent the last 40 years having people trying to shove me in folders. It's gone past me really caring that much about that. I think we have a country that needs help. I think Muslims need to start thinking about helping it. And I don't have an opinion. I mean, when I look at England and English law and the way they do things, and that they actually do have a religion that's considered the religion of the land, maybe some of her ideas, maybe if some of her ideas actually fit for over there for the way they do government, all her ideas do not fit here. Do you understand? But to look at this and to think about this and to try to work in this, I think is a good idea for people to start doing.
Again, I believe that Muslims already should be doing this, right?
Yeah.
We should already be influencing legislation.
Right.
My argument, and this is I prepared myself actually to argue against Claire's understanding of this term, the one that
Oh,
she presented. And so what you're saying, there are things like you said, changing amendments, and as I said, to change an amendment is not an easy deal. There's only been 27 of them in what, however long since what 250 years. There's only been 27 amendments. 11,000 proposed, only 27 amendments. It's not an easy thing because you do need a majority, not a majority of people, but you need three-quarters of Congress. I mean, three-quarters of state legislation to pass any amendment. And this is not something simple. But what we can do, what we absolutely can do as a people, and it's viable and it's easy and it's doable, is to actually influence the laws in our area, to change the laws in our own communities, in our own municipalities, and have an actual influence on our state legislation. We do have the ability to do that. But changing an amendment to the Constitution, if we're not working on a local level, if we're not working on a community level, if we're not working even on a city level, a county level, as you have it as you will, then we cannot work on a state level. And if we're not working on a state level, when you need three-quarters of state legislation, then we'll never get there. So
okay. Look. Theoretically, it's possible. We just
theoretically,
had
if we start at the bottom,
theoretically. Well, now you're talking about methods, but theoretically, it is possible that Muslims could form an alliance with other conservatives in the United States. They can take some of the social. I, mean, I think of it more as social issues from the Quran. You could take some of the more social issues from the Quran and keep focused on that to try to make this a better country. And I think a non-Muslim can do the same thing. You cannot tell someone that they can't take a law out of the Quran once they've seen it. This is what I'm saying. Some of what Claire says is actually stating the obvious. There's no way you could stop it if somebody wanted to.
Actually, a lot of what she said, and this is part of the problem. You're what you just said, and I do want to wrap it up, but you just opened up an interesting thing. First and foremost, if somebody went into the Quran and they read a particular verse, right, and they said, I want to take this and make it a law, they can actually write up a proposal. They can submit that proposal to the state legislature. They can get people to vote for it, right, and they can
Right.
get that law passed. But
Right.
does that make it a Quranic law? Does that make it an Islamic law?
No.
No.
But it does make a scripture as a source of, and we
No,
have
it doesn't. It doesn't because it could very
and we
well be
already
counter.
have we
It could
already
very well be counter to the Islam.
well
It could be
I'm
just
saying
because
is
somebody goes into the
whether
Quran and they extract something that they think they understood, right? Doesn't make it Islamic.
are
And
we
that's
going to
that's
make it
why
illegal to have adultery?
I
I mean,
wish.
that's the usual one. Okay, we're gonna make it illegal to have adultery. So if we go, if people go do that and put it all in, does that make it an Islamic law or not?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so you're stating the obvious.
But
Everybody's
now here's
stating
the
the obvious.
question. Here's the question. We'll use Claire's example. All right. So if a girl becomes pregnant, does she get lashed? Does she get put on house arrest?
It
As
depends.
law. As law.
It depends on how people agreed to do this law. Nobody
But it
can
it
make law.
doesn't. And that's the
In
point
this
that I'm
country,
making
it
is
does,
that
though. In this
no, and
country,
so
it
that's
does.
the point is that now it's not Quranic,
Look, you
right?
can't do the lashes. You can't give the lashes for adultery in the United States.
I'm not asking whether we can. You said there's possibility, so we'll just play with the
No, no,
possibility.
no, no, no. I don't like this particular example because the
Why?
Supreme, let me finish, because the Supreme Court has already made a decision that these sort of things like public beatings and this kind of stuff is cruel and unusual punishment. You can
We
kill
can
somebody.
overturn that. We can overturn that.
They've already ruled on it. I don't.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
well,
can
they haven't
overturn a
done that.
ruling.
They haven't done that.
Right, but it's possible.
I don't think it's possible that Americans would vote for that.
You you can't have it both ways.
No, I can't have it both ways because there's a practicality involved here. Knowing
No,
the
what I'm
American
saying is
character,
that
they're not going to
you
vote for
can't
that.
say you can't say that you can get an amendment changed based upon the Quran and then say you can't get an
No, I
amendment
didn't say
changed.
get it based on the Quran. I said that can be used to get a lobby group, a platform, and a lobby to do this stuff. You're kind of making this more. I guess you're drawing more of a straight line or something. I'm not saying that we can institute Islamic law in the United States. That's
My
why I'm saying that's one of the reasons I would not as accept going to an Islamic arbitration for law is because I don't believe the United States government can have any say about religion. I'm saying I want an absolute iron wall between the two. So I'm
I
not
don't
accepting it even if it's okay. I'm not going to
I
accept it.
don't I absolutely want
But
for
I would go
Islam.
to it. I would get it from an Islamic place too.
But
That is where I would personally go. But don't
let
want the
let me
government
go
saying
back. Let me go back to this example real quick.
that.
Is
Mm-hmm.
that Claire's position is that somebody who is guilty of fornication is to be put under house arrest. And she bases this upon a ayat, a verse of the Quran that was clearly abrogated, known to be abrogated, but she doesn't accept the abrogation. She doesn't accept the abrogation because she doesn't know the science of hadith. And so she's going in, extracting something, making up her own law based upon an interpretation that she's made based upon a translation of the Quran. Right? Now, somebody does that. If somebody does that, can they do it? Yes, they can. Right? Does that make it Quranic just because they pulled a verse from the Quran? It does not, because it goes against the very Quranic principles. And that's the point that I'm making. Just because somebody goes,
I don't
huh?
know about this one. She's always told me she wanted everybody lashed, so I don't know what this. I don't know about that. I can't address that. But what I'm saying is there's some obvious things here. One of them is you can't really stop somebody from self-interpreting the Quran if they get up their hands on one.
No,
So
but you can stop it from becoming a normative understanding or application. And that's the role of the mujtahid, which is anybody who should be dealing with legislation should be a mujtahid.
but that's not where we're living.
No, it is. We have mujtahids here.
No, no, we're not living in an Islamic state.
It doesn't matter. Even
I'm
if
not right now. I mean, if you're going to look at, okay, I think you got to hang up because you said you had to do something.
yeah, I
Yeah, I'm
do, but
sorry.
go on. It's
All
okay.
right, all right. So that's all right.
No, what I'm saying is that if somebody is going to go and try to pass legislation, they need to understand the basis. They need to understand the principles of they need to understand the actual wording of the Quran. They need to understand the asbab al-nuzul. They need to understand the nasakh al-mansukh. They need to understand whether it's a hukm qati or hukm al-dhanni. They need to understand all of these things. They have to understand the difference between usul, ahkam, what is the maqasid that surrounds this? What is the qawa'id that governs it? They need to understand all of this before they say, let's move forward with this. So there are qualifications to a person going in and extracting judgments from the Quran, right? A person could read the Quran and take benefit all they want, but that doesn't make their judgment correct. And so if a person wants to work with legislation, then they have to have the proper foundation from which they can pass judgments going into the original sources and interpreting the intention of the lawgiver, which is God alone. And if they can do that, right, then they should be working to push legislation. And if they can't do that, then they should find the legislation that shares our values and work with those people. There's no harm in that. But that's neither. The second is not Quranic. The first is Quranic. And that's the point.
The secular Koranism isn't Islam at all.
Oof.
Okay,
Lord
it's not Islam at all. That's very clear.
SubhanAllah.
Okay?
And
that's where you're
again
having
is the
a
problem.
with it. Okay.
No, it absolutely is a huge problem.
Okay, but
it is a huge problem.
We live in a country that, although the idea is that the state isn't supposed to push on a religion, which I take exception to because they seem to be doing a lot of pushing. But we're supposed to be free from the state about religion, and we can use religion to do to influence government. We certainly can use a secular idea to influence government. See,
I do have to end it, but I'm going to say that it's not a secular idea if you're using the word of God.
All I'm doing is if I look in the Quran, I get an idea that's useful for in the secular word. I'm not going in there and pushing an ayah at him and saying this is it and that's our new amendment. Okay, well, what I'm looking at, I live my life as a Muslim. I live my life as a Muslim, and so I'm going to think an awful lot of things are a good idea in the Quran.
I'm going to say this is my position, and we'll and I'll leave you to say something in closing. My position in closing is this: that there is absolutely only one lawgiver. Right? There's only one lawgiver.
Absolutely.
And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he explained those laws to the people in such a way that it was understood so that it could be applied appropriately. And then after the passing of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, it was normalized in the society and it was codified. And so now, after 1400 years, we have a codified understanding of the maqasid and the qawa'id and the usul of the Sharia, meaning the usul, meaning that the methodology of extracting the rulings. We're just going into the original sources, extracting the maqasid. What are the aims of the Sharia? And the qawa'id, what are the maxims that govern the Sharia? Right. So we have all of that, and all of that is based upon the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And all of that is based upon his example, is based upon what the lawgiver revealed to him, right? So So when I look at anything that is Quranic, I'm seeing God is the lawgiver, the prophet is the disseminator, and then our ulama are the codifiers. Now that if somebody says to me Quranism or the like thereof, that's immediately where I'm going. And when we add secular Quranism, when we add the word secular, what immediately comes to my mind is that there is a divorcing, there is a cutting off from God, right? There's a cutting off from God. And so this becomes a problem. And so what we have discussed in this very long video, I have said what I agree with and I've said what I disagree with. But when what I personally call to, and this is a big thing because Claire likes to challenge, what about enjoining good and forbidding evil? And how do you think your method is working? And all these things that she likes to say, because her methodology is to try to insult people to incite them. But that's no problem. My point here is that my idea is not top down. My idea is that if you change the hearts, if you guide the hearts, if you help humanity become human again, that they will want to follow the guidance of God. And they'll actually do it naturally because it's part of our natural disposition. But until we call people back to God, we're going to keep getting, no matter what the laws on the book are, if you don't call people back to God, you're going to get more of the same. That's my position, right?
Okay.
And my call, my invitation is not to law. My invitation is always to God, right? And so I'll say that that's my closing statement. I'll let you to close, and then I'll just
Okay.
end
Okay.
it.
This is how I see things. And the idea of that if somebody dies, I'm talking about in the Islamic community, somebody dies in the Muslim community, it's everyone's responsibility to bury them until somebody does it. Right?
Fire,
All
correct.
right. Okay. That's how I see all this. I see it all as different parts that can come together to create a whole. So I believe that there should be a lot of people just like you talking about what you're talking about. And I think there has to be some Muslims and just regular people in society that have the idea that they need to try to affect the law itself. And that eventually this will all come together in a good way. I'm not saying one or the other. I'm encouraging a development of this within the wider I don't know what you want to call it, some cute idea, the quilt of the Muslim experience in America and the experience of America as a whole. This is how I'm seeing it. I'm not saying I'm myself. I'm always going to follow Islamic Sharia as best as I can. If I get a divorce, I'm going to. My divorce isn't the secular law. It would be what I get at a court. I am not letting the government infringe on my religion or have any type of authority of it at all. Is why I won't go to arbitration. I have a little bit of a different way of looking at some of this stuff. But I believe that these different ideas can come together to create a real picture of Tawheed, a real picture of something really good, if that makes sense. This
No,
is
I
not,
don't disagree with you.
yeah, it's not an argument that okay, secular Koranism is going to replace Islam, and or we're going to have. I'm not seeing it that way. So I would like some Muslims to start thinking about in this way and exploring the Constitution and trying to get an idea of how they can relate to the law itself to improve this country. I'm encouraging that, and I encourage everyone to read the Quran as a Muslim. That would be great, and I encourage everyone to follow Sharia if they can. But I don't think non-Muslims are going to follow Sharia. I mean, that's
I
just insane to
Oh,
think
I
that.
disagree, but I
I mean,
disagree with that. But no, it's fine. I do have to go. I
okay,
actually it's kind of like a hard stop. But I did before I'm just going to make a dua and close. But I'm going to say,
okay, sounds
Claire,
good.
Claire's been talking the
Oh,
whole time in the sidelines,
oh
and
my
I'm not
God.
going to. I can't address it. My thing is that if you want to be part of the conversation, join the conversation. You're always welcome, and we can just you can present your own position instead of being on the sidelines. I can't have a conversation with somebody else, read everything you say, and respond to it. And so it doesn't work that way. If you want to be on,
Well,
come
shit.
on.
I think she might talk to you. I think she thought this was maybe too many people on at the same time, which it might have
Uh,
would have been because I talk a lot.
no problem. All right, with that, سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Claire, Carol, thank you for that.
All right.
Did it again. Carol, I appreciate you joining me for this. It's not what I actually expected to get into, but I do
Okay.
appreciate the conversation,
Okay.
and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
All right.
Assalamu alaikum.
Let's see how I can. I never can read these right.